Prime Minister Liz Truss is reportedly set to begin a charm offensive to try and reunite her party and reinvigorate her premiership. This comes as another big U-turn is reportedly on the cards, with several Tory MPs warning the government they would lose a vote on a real terms cut to benefits. Truss also appointed Greg Hands, a former backer of her rival for the Tory leadership Rishi Sunak, to minister at the Department for International Trade. This followed the sacking of Conor Burns, who was suspended after eyewitnesses claimed he touched a young man's thigh at a hotel bar. So, after all this, what of the party's electoral fortunes? Well, joining me to discuss that further is Joe Twyman, who's co-founder and director of polling company Delta Poll. Good morning, Joe. I just want to first refer to a poll you have done at Delta Poll. It's voting intention, which shows the Labour Party 25 points ahead with 51%. I just wondered, in terms of seats, how that translates into seats. Would that be a huge majority, we're talking, for the Labour Party, if an election was held tomorrow, of course?
Yes, if there were a general election tomorrow, it points to a strong majority for Labour, even without the Scottish seats, many of which would be taken up by we assume by the SNP. But of course, the important thing to remember is that, as many of your viewers, I'm sure, will be saying at the screen now, there isn't a general election tomorrow. And though polls are a good snapshot of public opinion at the current moment, they don't necessarily provide much in the way of indications of where we will be over the coming weeks and months. And I think it's that Liz Truss is hoping she can turn around with her, if you like, reset today.
And how volatile is public opinion? Because can it change sort of on a dime? Is there things that Liz Truss can honestly do at this point that can change the party's electoral fortunes at this point? Because 25 points and bigger in some polls is a huge lead for the Labour Party.
Yes, that's right. At Delta Poll, our lead of 25 points is actually at the lower end of some of the polling that's been conducted. It has been as high as 33, and even in most recent polls, it's up to 30. And it is true that polling does fluctuate. All polls are subject to a margin of error. That's to do with the laws of probability, and we can't abolish that in the same way we can't abolish the laws of gravity. So there are fluctuations along the way. And indeed, as recently as a few years ago, the Conservatives had more than 20-point lead, but that was during the pandemic. What we're interested in when looking at polling is the long-term trends, however. And the trend over recent months has not been good for the Conservatives. Conservatives haven't been ahead in a published poll for the entire year. You have to go back to December 2021 for the last time that happened. And over the summer, Labour enjoyed leads of between 10 and 15%. But since then, the trend has been one of acceleration towards Labour, and they've really benefited from a combination of events, including a positive party conference for them, a bad party conference for the Conservatives, and of course, the reaction and fallout from the markets and from the commentariat around the mini budget. It's all been, if you like, a perfect storm for the Conservatives, which has led them to this position now. The question is, looking forward, how will the party perform over the next few weeks and months? Because, as you say, there's relatively little that Liz Truss actually has available to her in terms of levers to move public opinion. And potentially with the cost of energy rising, with a difficult winter ahead for the NHS, as it always is, but this could be particularly true this year, and even the risk, however small, of blackouts could mean that the government actually is in one of its strongest positions at the moment, and things may get even worse.
And let's talk about Scotland and Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP's prospects. They're having their conference, and today is the last day. She's expected to make that big final speech, and she very much will be, as expected, rallying for another referendum, although the Supreme Courts are going to have to look at the constitutionality of that. Where are we now, as it stands, in terms of support for a second referendum?
Well, what we've seen is that the SNP is around about sort of 40 to 45% in the polls, depending on which you look at, and it's been pretty consistent on that. But the big increase has been with the Labour Party, who have really benefited from the collapse of the Conservatives since going all the way back to Ruth Davidson leaving the leadership there, but also more recently with Liz Truss becoming Prime Minister. So Labour in a strong second. And what we've also seen consistently is support for remaining as part of the United Kingdom. This is something that has been seen time and again in polls. And so it's one thing for Nicola Sturgeon to say that she is looking for support for a referendum, but something quite different for her actually then to win that were it to occur.
Mm.